First Club, which brings together people that do good and give back in social and environmental initiatives. So let's bring in Sophia if she's ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, Sophia, great to see you.
Hi, how's it going, Luke?
Really good, really good. Thank you, first of all, for your time today. Really appreciate this because whenever we meet, normally you have so many things going on all the time. Um, so let's start off with just say who you are, explain briefly about what it is that you do.
Well, I'm an illustrator and designer. I've been working in the creative space for about a decade plus, and in recent years, I've kind of branched off into a lot of different areas. I think, in short, I'm really just a skill hoarder. It's like a self-entitled little phrase that I've given myself to kind of describe to people what it is that I do. But yeah, I'm just really interested in learning and learning new skills. And it's a classic teach a man how to fish or a woman, and they'll live the rest of their lives. And so, my roots are in illustration design. In recent years, I've gone into a little bit more consulting, a little bit of brand strategy, social strategy, and also teaching, which has been really exciting.
Well, I mean, well, from what I've seen, the teaching part, you've gone really deep into that. I'll ask you a bit more about that later in the conversation. As you were talking then, I remembered, I don't know if I've actually ever told you this. I went to an event that you spoke at. It was a one-on-one conversation with Jeff Stapon, and it was downtown. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. That was the first time that I'd really seen the scope of work that you've created over the time that you've been really forging forward with illustration and design. And I did tell you this quite a few years ago when you released a collaboration with Puma with the disc sneaker. I did actually buy a pair
What?
um, in the UK.
Wow.
I thought I told you that.
I don't think you ever told me that. Well, that's awesome. That's so cool.
and
Thanks.
then and then I resold them. Sorry.
They actually are available online still. Sometimes, like for fun, I think they'll have it on like eBay. Occasionally, you'll be at like the sneaker reseller sites and stuff like that as well. So it's cool.
So give us a bit of a backstory as to what you've done leading up to now, the work you've creatively done with big global brands, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a natural gravitation towards the arts. I'm born and raised in Queens, New York, and so grew up in a very, very diverse environment. Just learning about all different types of cultures and so forth, and just a classic kind of hustler approach, as in learn how to make a dollar out of 15 cents. And so I really led with my own personal interests and my skills. And so I went to art school, majored in illustration. During my time, I knew that, hey, 4 years after I graduate, I'm going to be chasing the same check as anyone who graduated, 10 years before, 5 years before, and so forth. And so making a living just drawing in New York City is kind of beyond imaginable, really. So I had to just, be really smart as far as, hey, what other skills can I learn in order to develop different streams of revenue in order to survive, right? It's all about survivalism. Um, and so I had an interest in streetwear, grew up in that, grew up collecting sneakers. And so I did a number of internships during my undergrad years that were very pivotal in terms of my growth and where I am today. So I had a chance to intern at Complex Magazine, working on the print side as everyone was migrating their content over into digital. And so working on the digital marketing side as well. I interned with a graphic designer that did a lot of work with Supreme, a lot of streetwear brands, Undefeated, and working behind the scenes, being a fan of streetwear culture, and being able to see how the production process looks like. How do we go from ideation to putting the art on garment? What does that process look like behind the scenes? And really just being kind of like Santa's little helper with people. Who were very fortunate enough to be able to bestow their knowledge on me and, correct me when I needed to be corrected in order to, just be able to perform at my best. And I also had a chance to intern and freelance with a web designer, thus like allowing me to be able to understand UI and UX. And so by the time I graduated, I had this pretty well-rounded approach of everything I've learned in school, everything I had learned during my internships, and plus, like, I was already working part-time jobs actually in sneaker stores in New York City in Union Square while doing all this stuff. So it's always been kind of this like busy bee, I need to apply myself somewhere approach. And so when I started freelancing, it's a classic starving artist story, kind of counting quarters to take the train in order to meet a client and just figuring things out. And my story is not that special. My story is just someone who really was conscious of what I needed to do in order to put my best foot forward. And I've been mentioning this in recent interviews since quarantine, and that I actually graduated right around the recession. So I literally would be going into my internships when someone would be at their desk, and the next day their desk is empty. So that's
Wow.
very jarring for someone who's graduating soon. They decided to pursue a college degree in the arts instead of, I don't know, going into business or a doctoral degree and so forth, like my parents would have wanted me to. So again, there's a lot of odds against you. And again, it's like we can either sit and look at the odds, or we can continue to strive towards our goals and where we want to be for ourselves. And so it's just a classic, like, applying yourself. Just to give you an example, like when I first started out, I would be on Craigslist every day. I would go into the art media job section. I would mass email, send out 100 emails, a couple times a week, and my resume, and just introduce myself to people. And my mentality to this day is still like, it's not other people's jobs to know that I exist. It's my job to make sure that they know that my work and myself, like my services, exist. So I've been very proactive, in recent weeks. And I think majority of my work, there's a lot of stuff that I do. There's a lot of different hats that I wear, a lot of different spaces that I'm in. But the common thread really is this interest of connecting the dots, connecting different communities. I think with my illustration work, when brands hire me to work on campaigns or, to do activations, a lot of that is to use my work to be able to showcase a story or sell a product and as to be able to accompany a campaign. But I have a health and wellness platform that Luke and Maxine are familiar with. And that has always been just my own journey of learning about health and wellness and caring for your body, something that was not completely foreign, but just wasn't a very popular dialogue within my own upbringing in Queens, New York. And, just learning about this idea of survival and how a lot of times this information can be elitist and can be kept in certain communities. And so again, it's always this focus of how we can build a better bridge. And I think I believe that art and design can save lives. I believe that art and design can be used to repackage information. So Undo has always been about repackaging the way we talk about health and wellness and, nutrition, mental health, physical health, but it's always packaged in a way that's very eye-catching. And so if you're interested, you can find out more at undoordinary.com. I also, what else is there? Gosh, there's so
Well,
much.
hang on a second. I just want to unpack that a little bit because you said quite a lot, and you introduced Undo Ordinary, which is a platform and a project I want to ask you a bit more about shortly. But I want to go back to something you said, that your story is not any different to anyone else. And if I think about, I can look at your work and see very distinctively that it is you. It has your DNA and your footprint all over it. And what I believe from looking at your work and then hearing you saying that, you're not doing yourself justice in the fact that I don't think many people coming out of university or college at a time of a recession would have had the same mentality or strived for the same that you did at that time, and possibly will be now with what's going on. Do you think that that was something that was instilled in you from your family, your ethnicity, or do you think that is hereditary of being in Queens, New York?
I mean, I think it's more of a New York thing. In New York, it's like either you hustle someone or you get hustled. It's what and if you're talking about client negotiation, it's kind of like that as well, right? So all the tips that people can say, whether it's if they agree to your rate at the first go, then you probably should have charged higher. So that's always kind of been my leading light. And to be really honest, when I was growing up, there was a good amount of Asian people around me, but majority of them were also just like mathematicians, and I still can't calculate like basic percentages or tips. I think a lot of it is just having a strong sense of self-awareness. Like at a very early age, I knew what I wanted to do and didn't want to do. Obviously, you can label that as stubborn or not. It was definitely a problem for my parents growing up, but I just knew what I wanted and what I didn't want to do. I knew that, you know, becoming a lawyer or a doctor wasn't really my calling. It wasn't an area that would really manifest and champion my skills. And I don't think at like an early age I really knew what my skills were and would be able to list them to you. But I was very self-aware of the fact that I think in whatever environment it is you put me in, I'll kind of figure it out. I'll kind of figure it out. And mix that with this passion and interest for the creative arts. That was kind of the perfect equation. And I guess what I meant with the statement of, my story is not special, like all that special, I think that really comes from the idea that, I am just this girl from Queens. I grew up with a lot of people who looked very similar to me. We all had this dream. I wanted to become an artist. People may have dreams of success. I think I never really dreamt of success. I think I was just more so, let me just try and see where it goes kind of approach. And I knew where I kind of wanted to go. And I knew that the effort required in order to, potentially meet goals and whatnot. And so I just always wanted to make sure I'm putting my best foot forward in order for my own best interest.
But it was interesting how you spoke about your family and knowing what you did and didn't like. My conversation recently with Maurizio from Atelier and Repairs, he said something similar. He comes from a big family, Italian family, and he said that his grandmother told him that he was the anarchist of the family, and it was kind of a similar vibe with what you're saying. He knew exactly what it is that drove him passionately, creatively, and really it's similar to you. And I think that's a thread that runs through, especially in creativity, and people that are really drive forward with the work you've done, especially. What do you think, being from Queens, New York, now living in Los Angeles? I believe LA is a super creative city. How come you came here to Los Angeles?
Well, my father he's retired now, but he was a civil engineer for the bridges of New York City. So he worked on a lot of the bridges, overpasses, and he worked in Wall Street. He was there during 9/11. And so because of his line of work, we were based in the East Coast, but the rest of my entire extended family was in Los Angeles. So, there was always kind of this connection, visiting family and so forth. But of course, visiting versus living is very different. I think that growing up in New York City, in the East Coast, we're sold this dream, right? It's like, I'm sure if you were in the UK, you had this dream of like America or LA or whatever. So in the East Coast, we were told the West Coast and this land of convertibles and sunshine and palm trees is the complete opposite of New York. So everything that we might not like about New York, even though we might love it about New York, it's a hate-love relationship. But like, being compressed in these subways, it's dirty everywhere. There's no personal space. You're constantly fighting the city, the people around you, and people are rude and all this stuff. And whatever you might hate about the East Coast or dislike on a bad day, West Coast was this beautiful, sunny, relaxed by the ocean, whatever. That was like the images that public media kind of sold us. And I think it kind of just weighed on me after a few years. And I was like, initially I came out here more as a, hey, winter is coming. It's going to be freezing. There's going to be no sunlight. I don't know if I can take it anymore. Let me just come here for 3 months. And, I ended up staying. One thing led to another, and I ended up staying here a little bit longer, but work still allows me to go back. My parents are still there right now. And so I still have a chance to be able to visit. Work allows me to go back and forth. And so as extravagant as bicoastal may sound, it is very tiring, but I think for now I'm still very stuck in the middle.
But your design work has a very gritty East Coast vibe feel to it. So it's sort of as if Los Angeles or the West Coast hasn't softened your design process or outlook on design.
No, it hasn't softened me as a person either. So that's been a little tricky as well because, I can come off as kind of like an intensive, passionate person and a lot of like enthusiasm, which I'm very used to in New York. People are opinionated. They're not scared to share their opinions versus here being in the West Coast, that can be a little off-putting to certain people that I come across. So I think it's really helpful for growth in the long run to see kind of how the other half operates. And I think if you're able to find a way to be able to survive in both and adapt in either environment, then it's like a classic yin and yang approach. How can you become a better rounded person? And definitely, I think I've been back and forth for the past 5 years now. And I want to say it took like 4.5 years. It took like 4.5 years for me to like actually, I had to literally, my entire DNA was New York grit, the New York minute, the New York attitude, and it was literally unraveling all of that of who I am as a person in order to try to survive and be at peace and be happy here.
Well, I think that this is testament to you, really, what you just said a moment ago, is the conversations that you and I have, whether it's on the phone or whenever we meet up in person, and you do fire things at a million miles an hour, but I really enjoy the conversations because they're so creative and so passionate and so inspiring that we often will vibe off each other on a lot of things. And then after you've gone, I've made a ton of notes, and then we're texting back and forward about things. And, still now, hopefully we may still have a project further down the line, whether it's this year or next year. But I don't know if that is a real New York thing. Maybe you've taken that from New York. Like, I'm obviously not from LA. I'm from the UK, but I'm from a coastal town in the UK. So I'm not from London. So I don't have that grittiness myself. I'm more laid back, but I do love the passion that you extend and exude when we have the conversations, and that definitely comes across in your work. And I think it's probably a testament to you with all of the amazing brands that you have worked with.
Thank you.
So tell me about, you have an agency, you do work creatively with a lot of brands globally. Explain a little bit about the agency, and then explain about what Undo Ordinary is.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to do Undo first because Undo happened first, which then kind of led into the agency work. So I had mentioned Undo briefly, the health and wellness platform that I work on with a business partner. And, the connection really started out as us as individuals going on our own fitness journeys, wellness journeys. I had started working, graduating college, working a lot, being at my desk for hours, hunched over, probably not the most ergonomic setup. And I was getting a lot of pains everywhere in different parts of my body. And I realized I'm sitting in these poor positions, trying to meet a deadline and so forth. And I realized I had to go to the gym. Going to the gym started opening up this world of eating better. And then I was just like, wait, where was this all this information? My parents never taught me this. My friends never talked about this. And I was just like, is there a way for us to be able to package this information? I want to share it with my friends now. I want to share it with the rest of this world. And so it became this opportunity for me to, take what I've learned from Complex using InDesign. And I started getting involved in the health and wellness scene, meeting people, going on runs, and just building this community. And so I took what I learned from Complex and was like, what if we turn this community, culture, niche, whatever it is you want to call it. We had a little name, Undo Ordinary, at the time, and we still have now, but it was like, what if we turn this ethos into a magazine? What would that look like? What would the colors look like? The fonts, the layout, the design, the flow. And that's really how I see the world around me as a creative, as a designer, because people will be like, well, you're an illustrator. How did you work on a fashion collection? How do you design sneakers? How do you do a magazine? How do you do a website? So different. But I'm like, no, at the end of the day, it's not. We're actually just communicating an experience for people, whether, and it's, I see it as like packaging design, or, you know, how someone would describe a Pinterest board or a mood board. You're extending and you're sharing a story. It exudes feeling. It ignites connection or disconnection. So with Undo, it was really about packaging the idea of health and wellness for a more diverse community, to be able to just make it interesting and make it realistic, because until then, majority of the health and wellness magazines we were exposed to were like Men's Health, Women's Health, you know, get sexy abs in 5 days. They're not talking about real stories, real health, even, you know, within the context of COVID. I don't know if you've been seeing, but like, you know, the CEO of YouTube had to say, you know what, we're pulling information that's not World Health Organization approved. So there might be a lot of holistic doctors, holistic resources as far as not taking vitamins. I mean, taking vitamin C, you know, a bunch of other supplements that you could be taking in order to boost your immunity or in order for you to battle COVID. And Facebook and YouTube are actually proactively trying to remove this information, which I feel like imposes on our freedom of speech anyway.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I think, you know, it's again, there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around right now, which we're not going to get into, but it's just this idea of, you know, information outside of the pharmaceuticals, outside of big pharma, outside of what we've been born and raised to believe, as far as going to a doctor, getting lab coats, or taking Tylenol and so forth. And there's a big uprising now, and I think Undo was a part of that. Our culture is rooted in searching for more than what we see in front of us, and it's an attitude, it's a community, it's and it's information and resource. And so that became its thing and still is an ongoing thing. We've been working on it for the past 7 years. Going into the agency part, you know, we were leading runs. I was someone who was building my own creative career, working with a lot of brands. And so, you know, it didn't take too long for other brands within this space to kind of reach out to do more. So Adidas have reached out to us when they were launching their social media platform. Hey, can you create some content for us? Let's develop a content calendar together, down to leading research and development trips for other corporate companies, or leading a run out of an Athleta store. And so there was a lot of mishmash and connecting with brands to develop content, introduce their community with ours, and a lot of like cross-pollination. And yeah, and then, you know, it kind of evolved into this agency approach. I think we just call it that as in a way for us to be able to work with our community. Because if we're working on more of a production job, then of course it wouldn't just be myself and my business partner. It would be, you know, who's a photographer that we can hire that worked on the magazine, or a writer that can be our copywriter for this campaign. And that's been great. That's been going for a few years. And it's this, I don't think there's really an end in sight. It's birthed out of necessity. It's birthed out of who we are and the need, or organically, as people who love to consume and continue to learn this type of information and wanting to share it with the world. This platform has to exist for us to stay sane. So we'll see where it goes. And you know, we're still holding our monthly talks as well. We just did our Come Talk to Me last night digitally. Yeah, and so it's still going.
I really love the fact that you couldn't find what you were looking for, or you were learning things yourself and couldn't find further information, and took it upon yourself to use all of your creative ideas and knowledge to build Undo Ordinary as a platform to help other people. I think that's so important, and I think that's probably, you can see that reflecting in your design work as well. You know, there was, on a previous conversation with Deshelle from Gallery LA, she mentioned she was on a panel with Virgil Abloh, and he said design gives us access to humanity. So how do you see design, the design process and communication moving forward?
Well, you know, even just within the context of everything that's happening right now, I know everyone's kind of managing and dealing with their own set of problems and challenges. But a lot of creative people, I know, I read this like little article from Nick Cave, and it was just this idea that creatives are the superheroes right now, right? We're all unraveling, retraining ourselves, reassessing situations, and this interesting metamorphosis that none of us really signed up for intentionally, that we're now forced to figure out as creative thinkers and doers. What can we offer? Because at the end of the day, you're really solving a problem as a creative person. And so it would be, I'm interested, every day, and, whenever this new normal like kind of calms down or settles itself. I don't think anything will ever be the same again. But I think it'll be really cool to just see how we all evolve from here, most of all creatively. And if you're blessed enough to just be someone to have a ton of time at home, it'll be interesting to see how we apply ourselves. And I think I was just talking to someone, one of our neighbors. She had to cut her dog's nails, or like cut the dog's. She usually sends the dog into the groomers, but she had to like cut the dog's hair a little bit. And I was just like, it's interesting, because of the current state that we're in. We're now forced to solve certain problems that our more privileged lives before allowed us to just kind of hand things off. Now we have to be more hands-on and solve a lot of problems. The first 2 weeks when COVID hit and everyone was stuck inside and everything got really serious, the brands were freaking out, right? The brands, people who had clothing brands, corporate agencies were all pulling their budgets. Everyone was just like shriveling up to try to figure out what they're going to do. But I think from that also breeds creativity in terms of solutions and out of the box thinking. And everyone has to do out of the box thinking. What are we going to do? More Zoom meetings or Google Hangouts? I think there's going to be a lot of interesting ideas that are going to just hopefully maybe take our humanity into a different level, or just from the working community.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because Maurizio mentioned something similar to what you just said as well, and as in, essentially, it will take thinkers, creative doers, to pull the world forward right now and in the future, which definitely aligns with everything you've just said. So to go off of that, how do you think that design can lead communication for the better for social and environmental?
I mentioned this a lot. Obviously, New York is the epicenter of everything that's happening right now. And Queens is actually like the main borough that's the most hard hit. And, as someone who comes from that city and that specific area, I'm kind of asking myself, okay, why would that be the case? And, Queens is they call it the world's borough because it's so diverse and people from all around the world are there. Obviously, the two major airports are there. And you go to the post office and it's just chaos. Like everyone speaks a different language. Everything has to have 20 different languages on the form and so forth. But at the same time, communication during this very pivotal moment in our, history is needs to be improved, because thankfully my parents are fine, because I'm Taiwanese, and so the Asian communities have much better communication because they've already been dealing with this. So the news and resources and information available for those communities is already pretty polished. But I'm thinking about like the Latinos down to the Indians and all the others that are there in Queens that may not have the right information as far as what social distancing really is, the importance of masking. For us, we can just open our phones and, like New York Times kind of explains everything for us. So I think how design comes into play is communication design, right? How can we communicate outside of language? How can we communicate with visuals, icons, information design? And we can open up that whole world. But I think now more than ever, creatives can also be superheroes within this play, whether it's designing wayfinders when it comes to social distancing within our new normal, down to signage, down to content, down to editing and so forth. Like I think there's so many roles here that are yet to be kind of defined for us, and I think our role is to really, again, continue to bridge those gaps, ease and create efficient communication through art and design.
How do you, outside of this right now, how do you think that it will lead social and environment outside of this?
What do you mean?
So outside of what you've just said,
Okay.
which is essentially communicating with some of the current issues right now, but I sort of feel that there's a lot of white noise, and you're only able to see what is right in front of you, and there's a lot of, I guess, things put to the wayside, and people are forgetting kind of the bigger picture. What do you, with environment and social, as in the underserved community or homeless community, or issues with the environment, how
Oh
do you
my,
think design?
all of that was like scary because you see everyone going to the stores just buying stuff wrapped in plastic more rapidly than ever, and everyone's gloves and face masks being tossed all over the place. You and I talk about sustainability a lot. It's hard, but I feel like all of that has kind of gone out the window in many ways. Like, I know Earth Day was just, early this week. I think it was maybe yesterday or the day before. But it's heartbreaking to see how everyone that was proactive about recycling or sustainability or taking, putting their best foot forward with that now has been like, screw it, I need to get as much toilet paper as possible and all this stuff. Um, and it's like the planet has kind of hit pause a little bit as far as that conversation. um I haven't really quite thought about where design plays into that. I think everyone has been switching gears into survival in the sense, and I personally have switched gears mentally in that place, as far as like, how am I going to pay my rent, and questions like that. And I think design will always be a very important player in that. I just don't, I like everyone else, I just don't really know where things are going to be. I think we need to, it was a lot easier to see, even the projects that we've discussed in the past, it was a lot easier to see into the future because we kind of knew what was going to happen. But because everything's completely thrown off, we don't know what next week is going to look like. We might have the vaccine by next week, but it might kill us all because it's not properly tested, or 2 months from now that the whole antibodies thing might be in place. And so our future is so in flux and so unpredictable that I think it's really hard to be able to see where art and design fits into it. But I know as a creator that we are here to solve problems, and I think we're just trying to solve the problems as they come to some extent right now.
Tell me about, it was quite a few months ago, probably even last year, we had a conversation, and you were explaining to me about an incredible project idea that you had built upon a previous project you'd done. And that project was going to be for this month. It
I
was the
know.
Earth Day pop-up. Just explain a bit about that, because I remember when you left, I was sat thinking, wow, in amongst all of the work that you do and had at that time, you were concentrating on this incredible 1 month pop-up project.
Yeah, I know. I saw the Earth Day, like all the Earth Day stuff, and I was like, man, totally missed the mark on that. So I had so the concept was, um, just again going back to this idea of connecting dots, connecting communities, and using art and design and to be able to add everything together. In previous years, I've done a number of different pop-ups, curated shows, whether they were art shows, auctions, charity-based auctions, to just pop-ups for fun, as weird as it sounds. I've always been interested. I personally love general stores. This is a fun little random fact. When you go to those stores, they have like notebooks and pens and like cups from Japan, and they look all fancy and pretty inside the store. And you buy it and you bring it home, and you're like, this doesn't look as fancy in my home as in the store. I've always been fascinated by that experience. And I think that's, maybe that's kind of retail design to some extent. But I've always been fascinated by the idea of how can we change the dialogue and the experience in a space, or within a physical space, by deciding what we put in the space and what's positioned next to each other. And going back to the auctions that I've done, majority of them were with different artists for a common cause. Down to the retail store. I had done a little pop-up in Larchmont when I first moved to LA with a friend of mine, a photographer, and we've always been fascinated by general stores. And so we decided to ask our friends to all come together, from Herschel to Jason Mark to Tried and True, that's in La Brea, Hypebeast magazine, and kind of just connecting these worlds together. That was who we were as people, but what would that look like? And so I had this idea, majority of it came from this idea, came from the Amazon being on fire in Australia, and just all the stuff that's happening on our planet, and feeling very bound being in LA, and just not knowing what else I can do aside from donating money, right? You can obviously donate money, whether it's one time or monthly, and be a part of the program, do a beach cleanup. Is there more? Is there more, a stronger way that we can, repackage information, package a message for the masses in a way that's authentic, that's genuine, that has a stronger ripple effect? So that was like something that was swimming on my mind for a while. And so I had this idea that I talked to you about, which was to create a pop-up that was merging this world of streetwear, lifestyle, cool guy stuff with sustainability. And so I have, because of the work that I've done over the past decade, I've been able to build a lot of great relationships with well-known street artists and bigger corporate brands like a Beats by Dre or Nike and stuff like that. What would it be like if we created a space that was designed and connected that world with eco-sustainability? One of my favorite stores in LA that you shared with me was Sustain LA. We literally were just talking about, man, we need to make another run because we need to pick up some stuff for the apartment. But what would it be like if we merged that? The importance of that experience is if people came to the space and they were able to see, that is really cool. I love the art. I love this and that. But I see that, we can get a street artist to work on something for Clean Canteen. And most importantly, be able to bridge the gap and show people that this is a very simple lifestyle pivot. And I think it's a lot of this work and all these random ideas just come from my own personal aha moments, so I call it, where, I remember the moment when I saw a post from Noah Clothing and they talked about single-use plastics. Obviously, everyone hears single-use plastic, blah, 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 all this stuff. But I had that aha moment when I saw this one post. And I came to realize, oh my gosh, I drink iced coffee every day. That's 3 pieces of plastic. How many times do I do that throughout the day? How many times do I do that throughout the week? And that's when my eyes opened up, and then one thing led to the next, and everyone's striving for a different level. There was a moment in time, and I'll continue to do this, where I like to eat leftovers a lot. So maybe I'll just leave the house with a little bit of Tupperware in my car in case we want to pack something at a cafe. I'll just grab it from my car, and I shouldn't be embarrassed of that. I should be okay with it. And so it's this, I wanted to be able to, again, use art and design in my community and bring them together to be able to change the dialogue of how we perceive eco-sustainability. So that was really the goal. It was supposed to happen this year. I probably had the idea a year ago. And that kind of got on the back burner. I think a lot of it, at that point, I was trying to do a bit of fundraising, a bit of outreach to reach out to different brands to see if anyone wanted to kind of financially support this cause. And that I just got really busy. And it's a classic, passion project, but I just didn't have time. Yeah.
Well, I'm sold on it. I still love the concept, and I think that
it's still going to happen one of these years.
I think maybe it could just launch digitally for now, maybe this year.
Yeah, it could. I think there's a lot of ways that it can still live. The concept is very applicable. I think for me, every project is different, right? This one, I really want to see it in a physical space, in real life, so I can see people's faces. I worked in sales, like retail sales for a while, and I love just talking to people. You know this. I love talking to people about why they need this in their lives. So I physically want to be at that store to say hi to everyone that comes in, tell them about the store, tell them about the story, and be able to have that human engagement with them.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, for sure. I'm with you on that, definitely. Let I'd like to know, for anybody that's listening or watching now or might listen or watch later, what's one piece of advice that you could give that is very personal to you that could help somebody or encourage someone to really take the first step into doing something more creative in their life?
This was something that someone said to me when I was having a really hard time trying to do something creative in my life, believe it or not. But I kept thinking I had imposter syndrome or something. And I was just emailing with a friend about something totally separate earlier today as well. And he was talking about imposter syndrome. But my friend told me, I was telling her about these problems I was having, what I think, and all my worries and my anxiety. And she was just like, you need to just give yourself permission. You need to just give yourself permission. I think I don't know where it comes from. A lot of times we're so deep in our own thoughts. We have these ideas where we're not sure. We want to do these things. I've always been really good at having ideas and turning them into actionable items, but I had this one idea where I I was worried about what other people might think of it and whether I'm packaging it correctly, right? For me, it's always about packaging, and it's different for me. And it's actually just consulting work. That's actually all it is. But I was worried because I was like, well, people might think I'm doing too much because I already do this and I do that and I do all these things. And I think adding another thing might be too much for people. But what ended up happening was the moment my friend said that, it created the aha moment for me. And as soon as I allowed myself, it took a little bit of time, but when it really settled in and realized I'm just standing in front of my own success and I'm standing in front of my own capabilities to really thrive on a whole nother level, the floodgates of creativity opened. Like there was a book that I wanted to write, and I wrote the whole, like almost like 90% of it. And when you finally allow yourself and trust yourself and know that just just not stand in front of yourself, the creativity, that energy, no matter what, will come out
Yeah.
whatsoever. And that was really a really exciting moment for me. Still battling with it here and there. But it's just I think the biggest takeaway is just allowing yourself, giving yourself permission, because sometimes we need to give ourselves permission more than we need anyone else's permission. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that you said that, just to give yourself permission, because yeah, I mean, as you were saying it, I do exactly the same. I'm sure most people do exactly the same. The imposter syndrome, even people that are creatively at their peak, or other people think that they're at their peak creatively. People, you're your own worst enemy, right? You're the only person
Yeah.
that is stopping you from moving forward and doing something that you've always wanted to do, because you're worried about what other people think or what is. Definitely give yourself permission. I love that.
Yeah, and it
um
can be the simplest also, like, application of that could be when, we all got stuck inside, and I just have to tell people it's okay to sleep in. It's okay
yeah,
to take one day for yourself. We're all overwhelmed, and it's okay to not do anything. And I think there were a lot of articles that came out about that, where, you want to read a book or podcasts or stretch every day, and it was just it's okay to give yourself permission for that.
yeah. Before we wrap up, I'd love to know more about all of the teaching work you do. I remember months ago you were flying everywhere teaching big corporations, and then you're also online doing courses, and then you're in sneaker stores, and like, tell me the passion behind that, because I love it.
It sounds crazy. So, I teach a bit online, and I think a lot of my teaching, the stuff the curriculum, like where I come up with this stuff, really is just kind of going back to my own little aha moments, but also the need to kind of reduce the learning curve a little bit. There's so much data out there. We have access to the internet. We're so overwhelmed every time we turn on our phones. We don't know whose advice we should really take, right? That's the best example. And we become overwhelmed. There's articles and podcasts and there's all this stuff. The answers are there, but where do we begin? And I think it comes from my own frustrations. So I teach in a number of different categories. One is social media, as far as like social media branding. And my approach to that is approaching social media, specifically Instagram, as a tool for your toolkit, just like using Microsoft Excel or QuickBooks or Photoshop, separating our personal relationships with these platforms and how to use them to propel your business, and approach it in kind of layman's terms. So teach on that. I also teach on business productivity. So kind of like Marie Kondoing your business. If you're a small business owner, whether you're a florist or a photographer or a consultant and so forth, there's all these different pillars of our business. We have to wear all these different hats all the time. How can we compartmentalize and organize our thoughts and thinking? Mainly using productivity apps, but also just like little different techniques that I have. And I also teach in brand strategy. So kind of like brand strategy, brand architecture. When you're a business owner, you're just you're busy working all day, every day, all the time. And sometimes most of us don't really take an opportunity to step back and do an analysis and assessment on what we've done. Why are we doing it? Why are we continuing to do it? Why do people continue to pay us for it? And so forth. And so it's kind of this like coaching session. So all of those classes are online, and I teach on Skillshare. And when I started to teach online, which by the way, I pitched the opportunities back to my university and they said no. I had pitched it to Skillshare years before and they said no as well. They were like, "You're an artist. Why don't you teach people about drawing? Why are you teaching about social media?" But ironically, they ended up coming back, and it's one of their top performing classes, the social media one. And so the classes led to workshop opportunities. So I was able to change up the curriculum so that it benefited people in a more in-person setting. And so I've taught at the Line Hotel. I've had a chance to be able to teach the workshops around the US, which has been great and very well received. And so they're usually like 2-hour sessions that I do in a room full of people. And the workshops have then led to kind of private clients and in-person consulting with corporate teams on social media or organization. And a big part of how I approach things is just how can we simplify the process, make it as easy as possible, streamline the learning and growth process, and hopefully it becomes something that's automated. So it's a classic, let me just teach you this stuff. Let me show you how it's done. Let me show you how you can do it. Here are some examples. Go run with the wind and go be happy and go build what you want that makes sense for you. And that's really always been my approach of how I do the teaching.
I love that. I love that. Sophia, before we go, can you share with where people can get more information on you, Undo Ordinary, everything else?
Yeah, I mean, all of it is on my website. You can access my my website and my Instagram handle are the same. They're kind of a bit of an acronym, but it's ESYMAI, and what it breaks down to is ESY. That's my initials, SC, and MAI is I am backwards. It's nothing special. It's just from like high school screen name days and like little like bit of graffiti that I used to do in Queens. But yeah, scmi.com or at scmi if you'd like more information.
I love that. And I actually never knew what it meant or stood for.
I know. People are like, that's the worst part of your branding. I'm like, I know. That's fine. That's fine. In time, I'll change it.
Well, look, I think you're an incredible person. I think that I would love to see your creativity long burn into the future, because I think that we need your creativity in our life. And I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks for offering the platform and the place. And I love that you're doing this from the comfort of home. And we need more stories like this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Yes.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia. She's incredible. I love her story. We have another conversation coming up with Mike Diamond. and then we'll have further conversations down the line as well. So please stay tuned. Culture Your Creative. Thank you.